This is Tibet in the 1930s, a beautiful isolated land high up in the mountains of the Himalayas, surrounded by the empires of Britain and China, and yet still almost completely untouched by the outside world. Tibet is now most famous for its leader, the Dalai Lama, who was forced into exile nearly 50 years ago. This treasure trove of rare colour films, shot by British, Chinese and Tibetan people who lived through these times, have been preserved by the British Film Institute. These films allow us a glimpse into a world which has almost entirely disappeared, to a time before the Dalai Lama and his people lost their country.
Oh, father. I think my father.
It's now impossible to tell the story of Tibet in Tibet because since the Chinese invasion of 1950, it's become a criminal offence to even discuss Tibetan independence in territory controlled by China. So, to tell the tale of the lost world of Tibet, I've had to come to another country. I've come to India. The Dalai Lama escaped here in 1959 and, along with the Tibetan government in exile, is based here in the Cloud Gange. To understand how Tibet was lost, why the Dalai Lama must live in exile, we have to look back to a time when Tibet was a free nation. This is Lhasa, the capital of Tibet, in the early 1940s. This film is of the main shopping street, known as the Barkhor. Despite being shot in the 20th century, it looks medieval. Hardly surprising, given Tibet's location. It was almost impossible to reach, so it remained frozen in time. Namgyal Takla lived in Tibet in the 1940s.
We had the huge mountains surrounding Tibet, and then we were inside this mountain, isolated. And we had the big Russia, China, Britain around us. And it was the policy to be kept, this country to be kept a buffer state, a sort of a zone where the big powers will not meet. And it was, we lived in the 20th century, we maybe have lived like we were in the 16th century.
Tibetan society was both feudal and deeply religious. Buddhism had a profound effect in shaping its culture and traditions. Ruled by a dual system of aristocratic families and Buddhist monks, the government's main function was to maintain the religious state. Tibet's feudal structure meant that most of the population lived in poverty. Any attempts to modernize or invite foreign influence were resisted by the conservative and profoundly religious outlook. Life in Lhasa was dominated by a huge number of religious festivals, which involved most of the city's population. "68 days of the year were taken up with festivals. Since the Chinese occupation of Tibet, all of these festivals have been banned. Even though life for exiled Tibetans has changed enormously since the Chinese invasion, Tibetan society is still deeply religious, and Buddhism is central to its culture. Tibetan prayer flags still hang in holy places. Each time the wind blows, the prayers that are written on them are released into the universe. Their colors are symbolic. They represent water, fire, earth, and air. Buddhism arrived in Tibet in the 7th century AD, about 1,000 years after it started in northern India. Focusing on spiritual development, all Buddhists believe that the road to enlightenment lies through the practice, the development of morality, meditation, and wisdom. At the time these films were made, monks made up 20% of the male Tibetan population. Every Tibetan family, rich or poor, sent their youngest son to a monastery as a spiritual and religious duty. Because monks had a high social status, poor families gave up their boys in the certain knowledge they would be looked after financially for life. These boys would just have arrived at the monastery. Even though in theory they could give up being a monk if they wanted, they'd expect to stay there for the rest of their lives. The present Dalai Lama, who is the 14th, was found while he was still a small child. In a tradition that dates back to the 17th century, the Dalai Lama, or Ocean of Wisdom, is both the spiritual and secular leader of Tibet. All Buddhists believe in rebirth and reincarnation, but for Tibetan Buddhists, the man they call His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, is very special indeed. Some see him as a man-god. All believe he's a reincarnation of all 13 previous Dalai Lamas, and he's a bodhisattva of compassion, an enlightened being who's chosen rebirth as a human being so he can be on this world to help others. When the 13th Dalai Lama died, his reincarnation, a 3-year-old boy called Tenzin Gyatso, was found some 600 miles from the capital in Amdo, a province in the far northeast. While the Western world was at war, the family made the long journey to the capital, Lhasa. The 14th Dalai Lama arrived in October 1940. By now he was 5 years old. He was accompanied by his father and mother and 2 elder brothers, Lobsang Samten and Gyalo Thondup.
Oh, father. I think my father. Father, yes. Oh, my mother. Oh, this is elder brother, whom I bully. My mother, very, very gentle. Almost I never saw her sort of the mental state of temper. I never saw. Very gentle. Always smile. Something very, very nice woman. A villager, uneducated. At the beginning, illiterate. Later, with her own effort, she can read some books. Now here, yes, my father with mustache. He very much interest keep his mustache very, how to say, very organized way. No, not like that. So he used, of course, our family from time to time eating meat with bone. So every time from the bone, there is something, what called marrow or something. Oh. So see, he usually used to put on his mustache, then do like that.
Although the young Dalai Lama was revered as a god king, he would not take up his position as head of state until he reached 18. Years of monastic study lay ahead of him. Buddhism involves training, transforming the mind so as to have a full understanding of the true nature of existence, to gain happiness and ultimately to achieve spiritual enlightenment.